Chapter 30. The Good Will. You say, I am not free, but I have raised and lowered my arm. Everyone understands that this illogical answer is an irrefutable proof of freedom. Leo Tolstoy. Picture yourself in a charming coffee shop with a delightful dilemma: carrot cake or chocolate cake. Now, imagine that some materialists, who also believe in determinism, argue that your free will is nothing more than an illusion. According to this perspective, your choice between the two cakes is not genuinely yours. It is merely the consequence of an elaborate and unbroken chain of causation. Your internal preferences and reasoning are inconsequential since you lack genuine agency in this matter. When choosing between carrot cake and chocolate cake, your decision is either a product of free will or an unknown cause. Let's say you are naturally inclined or predisposed to prefer chocolate cake. However, against all odds, you opt for the carrot cake instead. In this situation, your choice exemplifies free will, as you act as the cause of your decision independently of external influences. Essentially, you bypass your predisposition and rely solely on internal calculations. Thus, free will, in its strictest sense, is the ability to override one's own causes. Suppose you possess a predisposition or psychological cause that would typically lead you to choose chocolate cake, but instead choose carrot cake. In that case, you can consider that choice an expression of free will. In other words, free will arises when the subject becomes the cause of their actions, acting independently and freely. You are free when you are your own cause. If you freely chose the carrot cake, you exercised your free will. However, if an unknown cause influenced your decision, it would not be considered a free choice. Now, let's consider an inventive artificial intelligence called the Automatic Choice Explainer, ACE. ACE has the remarkable ability to reveal the hidden causes behind your decisions. Upon consulting ACE, you discover the cause that led you to choose the carrot cake during your previous visit to the coffee shop. This newfound knowledge presents you with new options for your next visit. Firstly, you can choose the carrot cake again, accepting the cause as it is and aligning your decision with ACE's information. However, in this scenario, the cause becomes nullified, as you merely select the carrot cake to conform to the cause rather than choosing it because of the cause itself. Alternatively, you can defy the reason provided by ACE and opt for the chocolate cake instead. Doing so demonstrates your freedom from being solely governed by that cause. You may feel a sense of resentment at being so predictable, leading you to assert your independence by choosing differently. It becomes apparent that being consciously aware of your own motivations empowers you to be your own cause, even if ACE attributes itself as the cause. This self-awareness allows you to exercise free will, transcend external influences, and make choices independent of predetermined causes. Suppose you argue that an unknown cause still influences the new set of affairs. For instance, you chose the chocolate cake due to your psychological tendency to be obstinate, not solely based on conscious free will. You entertain this possibility for the sake of argument, but as soon as you do, you realize that ACE presents you with another dilemma the next time you visit the coffee shop. Now you know you had a cause for choosing either carrot cake or chocolate cake before, but with the added factor of stubbornness. Consequently, you face a decision: stay consistent with the other causes or defy them by avoiding cake altogether, thereby demonstrating your freedom from these influences again. The information of past influences multiplies the choices before you, allowing you to either ignore, abide by, or contravene them. Furthermore, when multiple influences are at play, it becomes impossible to determine which past influence is the primary or deciding factor in your current decision-making. The interplay of various causes adds complexity to your choices, highlighting the intricacies of exercising free will in a world shaped by multiple influences. The idea of an infinite or near-endless regress of unknown causes may arise from this scenario. Even a hypothetical ace machine would struggle to calculate such an intricate web of prior interactions and causes entangled in a complex chain of events. Moreover, the ace machine must possess some agency to determine the best answer among the multiple causal pathways that may arise from random or ambiguous events. In other words, the ace must be free to choose the best answer. Additionally, the probabilistic nature of quantum physics adds an element of randomness to the choices, leading to uncertain responses from the ace. Additionally, feedback loops may exist in a materialistic universe, further complicating the understanding of the causal chain. The branching nature of reasons implies a highly entropic state in the past. This contradicts the second law of thermodynamics, suggesting that systems move from a less disordered state to a more disordered one. Such complexity and uncertainty challenge any attempts to trace causal pathways with precision, making it difficult to pinpoint a definitive cause or explanation for certain choices and events. This scenario's endless unknowns lead to an epistemological problem, an absence of evidence. If we lack free will, we cannot know why, and if we don't understand why, we have no reason to assume so. Denying free will becomes self-refuting because assuming an infinite regress of causes without a logical reason is irrational. Such assumptions can be vulnerable to skepticism, as expressed by Hume, who argued that our ability to genuinely know cause and effect is questionable, since we merely observe events occurring sequentially and assume a causal link between them. Therefore, the lack of evidence and the uncertainty surrounding causation challenge any conclusive assertions regarding the nature of free will. The intertwinement of causes mentioned earlier is closely linked to the self-referential aspect of consciousness. As consciousness can be aware of itself, it possesses the rational capacity to consider this self-awareness in its decision-making process of self-governance. Consequently, the more self-aware an individual becomes, the greater their freedom. It is essential to recognize that even a person with limited awareness may still possess some level of independence, although less compared to someone more conscious. The fundamental nature of cause and effect dictates that the final cause holds the utmost significance anyway, as it has the power to invalidate the entire sequence of causes that precede it. If we accept that free will is an illusion, it becomes another item on the list of qualia that materialists disregard. Similar to ethical behavior, materialists may overlook the rational implications and proceed as if free will exists. They might try to convince you that you lack free will while being oblivious to the fact that you must actively choose to accept or reject their conclusions. It's important to recognize that logic is an algorithm of instruction, and conscious agents often disregard it. This ability to reject logic suggests that reasoning cannot be considered causal. Furthermore, rationality itself relies on free will. Without free will, the possibility of rational thinking becomes untenable. Take, for example, the logical paradox below. The statement below is true. The statement above is false. It is a version of the liar paradox that requires the active participation of a conscious observer even to recognize. The conscious observer of the sentence must follow the logic back and forth by making choices. First, the logician must read the sentences, but may start with the first or second sentences. It doesn't matter which is chosen first. After the choice of sentence is made, the person is directed to the other sentence. Assuming the first statement is true, the second sentence should be accurate. However, the second sentence contradicts the truth of the first statement, creating a logical inconsistency. So the question is, does this calculation require freedom? It seems so, since the agent agrees to draw a conclusion and can arrive at it randomly, choosing either the first or the second statement, and the agent also must decide apart from any external factors relying on internal mental processing. In other words, there is no external cause available for logic. When a person draws a conclusion, it appears to be an act of freedom. However, if we cannot have the liberty to conclude, then our thinking process itself is not free, and all our conclusions are predetermined. This raises the question of whether thinking itself is an illusion. While logical choices are made, materialists might argue that these calculations can be automatic, similar to a computer's processes. So, examine the following paradox. I'm not consciously aware of myself. If we are machine-like in the use of logic and reason, being mere subjects of mindless causes, then the expectation would be a malfunction if the logic loops endlessly. If I am not aware of myself, how do I know that I am unless I am first aware of myself? But how can I say I am not consciously aware of myself if I am aware of myself? Here, the materialist may propose that a causal relationship between logical contradiction and some other principle can rescue the brain from this loop. However, upon closer examination, we realize that evaluating the sentence in that way necessitates self-awareness along with the brute ability to make calculations. Why does existential self-reference occur? A feedback loop brings the logical system, or any system, to a standstill. The subject must consciously decide to consider itself because the effect becomes the cause in a feedback loop. This self-causation is the essence of free will. Feedback loops, driven by self-referential awareness, create closed logical systems that function independently of external influences, or it could not be considered a loop. Therefore, if we have self-consciousness, it logically leads to the capacity for reasoning and taking action from an internal cause alone, indicating the presence of free will. Creativity is an aspect of consciousness that necessitates free will. Natural processes can bring about new structures or systems, like the shapes of rocks or life's adaptations, but they cannot be considered genuinely creative. Of course, changes in our environment reflect divine creativity from a philosophical perspective, but for argument's sake, equating these processes with creativity confuses mere change with intentional innovation. We must raise the bar a bit to make the case that creativity is evidence for human agency. Creativity implies intention or purpose in everyday language, such as when we commend children for their creative drawings with crayons. Even when discussing the natural world, we often use anthropomorphic terms like Mother Nature, suggesting intentionality, as Mother Nature solved this problem for the chameleon by giving them the ability to camouflage themselves from predators. This indicates an underlying assumption of intention or purpose behind the processes, which requires the capacity for free will. Creativity is not just change, but intentional change. If creativity is a real thing, it must assume free choice, not merely novelty. Novelty is essential to the free will debate, not the kind of novelty identical to superficial change, but a pure novelty. Pure novelty is anything with no precursors, and since pure novelty has no precursors, it has no primary cause other than the consciousness that invented it. It is entirely new. A mind's generation of pure novelty infers freedom from constraints, at least enough to innovate, and cannot be a product of sheer chance. Let's consider an example with a deck of playing cards. The odds of any specific shuffle-ordered pattern are incredibly vast, making it highly improbable that the resulting order has occurred in the universe's history. However, if I intentionally arrange the cards in a specific order, it becomes challenging for an outside observer to determine whether the order resulted from design or chance. Pure novelty goes beyond mere probability. It involves creativity that goes beyond random occurrences, leading to finely tuned designs with intentionality and meaning. For the argument to hold, creativity must manifest as a pure novelty, resulting in structured and meaningful innovations. With the bar set appropriately, the question arises, what could a consciousness create that is pure novelty? There are many. Unsurprisingly, I would argue that the art of storytelling would be the most fitting contender. Creating a story, especially one that is fantastic or science fiction, does not merely tinker with existing circumstances or rely on capricious whims of chance. A story is unprecedented unless crafted to be a prequel or a sequel, and even then, it emerges from new arrangements formed by the mind. A story is entirely created from the mind, requiring no measurable quantity, but begins with qualia, propelled by imagined plots and brought to life by invented characters. However, the materialist might argue that the creation of the story arises from prior interest, personality, or knowledge. Yet, this argument falls short when applied to the art of storytelling, for a story is not a mere transmission of information or a simple rearrangement of familiar elements. It is not simply a new arrangement of parts or perceived change. It transcends the mixing of cards in a deck, for it bears a profound meaning and explicit purpose. Take, for instance, the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, such as The Hobbit. Tolkien indeed drew inspiration from Teutonic myths, Old English lore, and Gothic tales in his writing. Sam Gamgee was even said to be the name of a living person. However, the proponent of determinism cannot demonstrate that any external factors caused Tolkien's story before its creation. While one could argue that circumstantial factors influence the decision to write, they cannot account for the unique arrangement of imagined experiences that compose the story itself. The intricate structure of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings emerges solely from the mind of Tolkien himself. It is a testament to pure novelty, a creation born from the depths of his singular imagination, not an endless regression of causes. Furthermore, a story requires the ability to imagine oneself breathing and moving within the confines of the narrative. The writer must first see his story, thinking of his thoughts to evaluate the progress or give depth to character. He must instead be conscious of the story within himself before giving birth to it on paper. Consider the case of Albert Einstein, who discovered his scientific theories through imaginative thought experiments, or the countless inventors who derived their innovations from vivid dreams. In such instances, novelty cannot be reduced to a mere physical necessity. The proponent of a deterministic worldview, lacking belief in free will, finds themselves exposed when attempting to demonstrate how Moby Dick, for example, was predetermined by physical necessity. Again, one sees the self-referential quality of the narrative, a quality that is hinted at by the universal story that we live. Perhaps it is more evident that exercising our freedom is a creative act. Therefore, our choices are works of art. Do our choices reflect the master artist? Freedom is an art, and true freedom is the freedom to do good. Therefore, the idealist life is a life of overcoming evil with good. Our choices should reflect the larger good story so that our subplots enhance the artistry of that larger story. In other words, the good story is holy.